Hello and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I want to talk about why using one prime lens and fixed focal length pretty much for the last month has really helped me improve my photography. Right, let's get into it. So the lens in question is this one. It's the 35mm f2 lens from Fuji. A relatively inexpensive lens, and I think in full frame equivalent terms it's around 52mm, so close to being a nifty 50. But what I found is, having used this pretty much exclusively for the last month, is it feels like the perfect focal length for my type of photography. Not without its challenges, which we'll get into in this video, but the upsides of using it pretty much exclusively, including on a trip to Lisbon, I'll talk about as we get further into the video. I think this location really suits the focal length that I'm using today. I mean, I always think 50mm is a great focal length for documentary photography, which, as you know if you've been watching this channel for a while, is my preferred style of photography. The Memorial Tower obviously is the focal point around here, but I just think there's a lot more to it in terms of things that I can document, with the added bonus that I've got quite a bit of space around me to zoom with my feet to get the kind of images that I want. So we'll go and see what we can capture. This area makes quite a nice area to document. Of course, this image will have been taken hundreds of times. Well, that's probably an understatement, thousands of times. Got quite a nice shot there. There was a guy sat on a bench at the side of the tower, just had a little bit of interest to the image. So I think this scene here suits this focal length quite well. I think this serves as a nice documentary shot of this particular location. This memorial stand is located quite high up, towers above the village, and you can see it for miles away. I just like the couple of benches there and the wall, and how that leads you off into the distant hills, which you might not be able to make them out as clearly today because it is quite hazy. Well, this is a very photogenic bridge. Anyway, I did talk about what it is about this setup that appeals to me so much. So having been used to using the X100 for a while now, one of the things I really value about that camera is its really lightweight form factor, and the fact it's just easy to throw around the neck and take with me everywhere I go. Now, I get if you're into landscape photography and your camera spends most of its time on a tripod, then the weight of your lens isn't a massive issue, other than when you're having to carry it up hills. But I do a lot of photo walks, and the lightweight form factor is a massive thing for me. Coupled with the fact that I'm always looking to challenge myself to do what I can to improve my photography. Whoever said filming outdoors was easy? So being restricted to one focal length pretty much all of the time, I do find it really challenges me, as you'll have seen from some of the images I've taken on this walk so far. Wow, I think this is going to be a day of fascinating finds. Look at that, that's beautiful. Now that's the image with the road winding off into the distance. I quite like the little cottage sign as well, near the wheel. I got an opportunity to use this setup recently on a trip to Lisbon. It wasn't a dedicated photography trip. I was there celebrating my 50th birthday with my daughter. I'll flick some images from that trip up on screen because I haven't made a specific video from there. But anyway, I got an opportunity to use this setup on that trip. I was a little bit nervous before I went, thinking that would I be really restricting myself too much, just having this 50mm focal length. Particularly knowing that, having seen images of Lisbon, how tight some of those streets can be. But in all honesty, I absolutely loved the challenge. I had to think outside of the box a lot. You've probably seen, if you've seen any images from Lisbon, there are a lot of, the trams are quite iconic over there. And of course, although I got one or two classic shots, I was keen to think outside of the box, and I think I did that. I hope I got a few images that are probably a little bit different from the norm. Hopefully, as you've seen from the images that I'm sharing, I was still able to find plenty of things to photograph despite the restrictions of a fixed focal length. Did I miss one or two images? Of course I did. There'd have been times where a wider focal length would have helped. And one thing I did notice when I was out there was a lot of people taking photographs with proper cameras. But it reminded me a little bit about myself when I used to exclusively photograph with zoom lenses. I'd be that person stood in one place and just using my lens to do all of the work. Kind of not having that flexibility on this trip was one of the reasons I was kind of inspired really to think, how can I try and get something different to the normal photos that I see from Lisbon? I suppose the lens choice it doesn't stop you from being creative or thinking outside the box, but I just found there was something about using a zoom lens that almost kind of welded me to the floor. I mean, let me know, do you resonate with that? I think this is quite a nice find. There's a kind of tramway village and museum around here. I don't know if it's running this time of year, but if you've been watching my channel for a while, I like safety barriers. So I'm assuming this is the actual, it looks like the end of the tram line. The tram stop for people to want to get back on. But it's kind of barricaded a little bit with those safety barriers. Again, I think a perfect scene for this focal length. It's just a case of deciding how much of the scene I want to include. I think I'm going to capture a little bit of those rails, just give the game away a little bit. Obviously, the fact it says tram stop at the side of it probably helps give the game away too, but I'll just include it in the foreground. Another example of a scene where I need to really zoom with my feet a little bit here though, because 50mm is quite tight. Ideally it'd be nice to kind of capture, I'll see if I can, capture the tram line, which kind of heads off to an abrupt end really, where that stop sign is, but let's see what we can do. To probably really kind of go back quite far to get all of it in. I think the only problem with that is from this distance the bus stop is a lot less obvious, and obviously that's my main subject. So I just thought I'd share what I've not enjoyed about restricting myself to this setup. I mean, there's not been much. As I mentioned earlier, there was certainly one or two images that I've missed that I would have been able to capture with a wider or telephoto lens option. But as I've previously mentioned on other videos, I'm beyond that point now where I let that worry me. It's surprising that once you restrict yourself to one focal length, how your eyes and mind adjust to what you can capture rather than worry about what you can't. Other than that, the benefits have far outweighed that. Now, I just love shooting with this setup, and the fact I really enjoy shooting with it means I'm taking the camera out more. So I know some of the people that view my videos, I'm probably preaching to the converted here, that regardless of whether you use a zoom or a prime, you adopt a lot of the techniques that I've talked about in this video. But as I always like to do, I like to give people something to think about. So if you are someone who hasn't yet tried to restrict a photography out into one focal length, I'd encourage you to give it a go. You don't need a prime lens. I've heard of some photographers taping the zoom ring on their lens, restricting them to a particular focal length. If you give that a go, I'd be really interested to hear how you found it, whether you've seen similar benefits to what I have. Guess what caught my eye there? Yeah, I bet you've guessed it. The old bus stop, stone cottages, and the contrast of the red car against them. As I keep saying on my videos, I always take photographs of anything that catches my eye. Might not be to everyone's taste, but it is mine. Well, shock, it's raining again. Today's been an eventful video to make. I was hoping to have it filmed before this rain came in, but I had all those interruptions on the canal path with the noisy motorbikes. I fell off a bench when trying to film. Try not to laugh. And now it's raining. But I know exactly where I can head to film the last bit of this video. The thing is, given my channel ethos is about motivating you want to go out with your camera more, I feel like the right thing to do is to film as many of them on location as possible. I think if I'm filming all of these videos at home, not taking any photographs, it kind of contradicts the messages that I try to convey. Right, let's go and find some shelter. So I've had to retreat to the tram shelter where I was filming earlier. Unfortunately, it's an open tram shelter, so rain is still hitting me. But anyway, I'd headed up back to the memorial tower to make a few additional points, but I couldn't film there because this camera isn't weather sealed that I'm filming on. But one of the points I wanted to make there was how, when I'd been there in the past with the zoom lens, sometimes I'd have suffered from like kind of decision paralysis. It would have been easy to have kind of stood on the path with the zoom lens and just used the focal range to change the composition. I've taken a few more images there, which I'll pop up on screen now, that will certainly be black and white ones. I think they'll suit this, what is now moody weather. But yeah, it's a shame I couldn't make those points there, because I think they'd have been easier to understand, but hey ho, we can't control the weather. So as always, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope it's giving you something to think about. As I mentioned earlier, certainly what I'm not advocating is that everyone goes out and buys a prime lens if they haven't got one. Or, this way of shooting may not work for you and the types of things that you like to photograph. But, I can only speak based on what I've learned and my own experiences. And, certainly it's made me more creative, as I've mentioned. It's enabled me to work within limitations, to make compromises, which photography is often all about that. We sometimes can't get the perfect image and we have to find compromises along the way. Certainly my photography is more intentional these days. I'm not necessarily the kind of photographer that kind of slows down and spends ages at a scene. But I think at times that's probably been to my detriment. I've certainly done more of that since I've been using prime lenses most of the time because I've had to. Is there anything else I want to share? I'm getting wet through, so probably not. because I haven't made a video from Lisbon, obviously you'll have seen some of the images that I've taken earlier in the video. I will pop more on my website, so I'll pop a link in the description to this video if you want to go and see more of the images that I took in Lisbon. I'm really pleased with how some of them turned out. I will definitely go back there at some point on a dedicated photography trip, and obviously I'll make some videos if that's the case. Right, I best make it back to the car. I'm just debating whether to put the waterproofs on or not. I'm wet already. I probably ought to, so I've got about a mile to walk in this rain, but I can't be bothered. Anyway, I'm waffling. Thanks as always for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.